So this is going to be a little study exploring depth, a few little tricks for adding depth to a painting. And these flowers are invented. I'm just making flower shapes out of my head. Something I'd point out is the confident quality of the line. There's all kinds of mistakes being made here, but it's not a sketchy, careful kind of drawing. It's the same kind of line quality as when we do the work with our micron pens. Being confident with line work, with paint, makes the page interesting. Might not be precisely accurate, but being confident brings a quality that is more important than precision, I think. So these are white flowers. The underside of this one is in shadow. And while that underside is still wet, you can put in the green stem. Any things that are in shadow, we want to have soft edges, so those can bleed together a little bit. And then in this foreground flower, notice a combination of simple washes that are fairly wide. What am I trying to say here? They're big, simple shapes, these blues. And then also some very delicate lines. And it makes for a nice contrast. Some big, simple areas, and then very detailed, delicate lines. That mix makes it interesting. Now, this study is being done with just our usual 7 colors: dark blue, light blue, dark red, light red, yellow, green, and brown. So up at the top here, it'll be apparent shortly where we're headed with this. But we're just looking for darks. And so the dark blue, the dark red, maybe some green, just whatever random colors. We're not really interested in the color. We just want dark. That said, um, that red that was put in, anytime you're making a painting that has a lot of green, it's good to look for a chance to put some red in. It just makes the whole page livelier. And the edge control, painting around these white petals. Now there's the payoff for the doodling that we do with hearts, where we paint negative space. You become good at that, at cutting an edge. And then when you're doing a painting like this, you've had a lot of practice. And so cutting that edge around those white petals is not a difficult thing for you. That flower's looking nice. And now as we're coming down into the middle ground, we can add some fresh green to give that area a little joy. This foreground flower in the lower right, I felt the drawing was a little clumsy. And one problem that I see right now is that the lower petals look like they're afraid of the edge of the paper. Better to have moved that flower up a little bit so it's farther away from the edge, or run it right off the edge. And we'll do that in a minute. This paint, this light blue, is implying white flowers that are in the shade. And the paper's a little wet yet, and so it's bleeding. They look kind of goofy. But it's one of those things where, right now we're staring at it. And it's easy to get hung up with, ooh, is this right? Does this make sense? When we're all done, your eye will just check that off. It looks like a natural thing. And now, up at the top here, now this real dark, this real dark area at the top is going to make more sense. What we are implying here is light coming between trees at the top of a hill. And so you take a brush with clear water and kind of chisel off some of the paint. And you can vary how wet the brush is, how much water you use or whether the brush is fairly dry. If you wet an area and then blot it with a tissue, it becomes very white. And maybe you want that, maybe you don't. Maybe you just want to loosen the color a little bit and let it slip back in somewhat. So it's really fun to experiment with this. There's just so many things you can do. It's interesting too how this debunks the notion. We've all heard people say, well, watercolor's hard because once you put something down, that's it. Not true. Well, it's true with green. Green is like using a magic marker. Really hard to lift off green. But all the other colors are pretty flexible. And you can do a lot to change them. Yeah, so that's looking like a uneven hill up at the top with some light coming through, and it gives the painting a tremendous depth. And even now, those middle ground flowers that were kind of melting, they look fine. They're doing their job. And so now we need to mess up that foreground flower. Painting outside the lines, being a little sloppy, and it's a good look. It keeps it fresh, unfuzzy. So I'll close with a thank you to those of you who have supported me on Patreon. It's very meaningful. Hope you're enjoying these.